Now you're welcome back. So it is transfer deadline day. We're coming up to just under 90 minutes left of transfer deadline day. Miguel Delaney of The Independent is with us on the line. Evening.
Evening. Hi, Joe.
I haven't had a chance to watch much Sky Sports News this evening. Have they recaptured any of the old magic, or is it an altogether more sombre affair around the grounds now?
To be fair, it's been, I think this is probably the busiest transfer deadline day there's been since the original Adam Wingy one, which I think was 2013. Of course, its own Adam Wingy, if a different outcome, given Aubameyang looks set to get his move. I was actually on Sky Sports News this morning, so I'm.
Oh, look at you!
Yeah, so
you've moved up in the world. Did you wear a yellow tie or no?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. But I do like it. It's been, I think, for all sorts of reasons, it's been a busy window and a busy day, and I think it's one that could have a tangible effect on how this season plays out, because I think it has kind of changed the chemistry of both the top four, the race of Champions League places, and the relegation spots. I mean, maybe even the title. I think as we were talking about before, although I think that's still probably a bit of a stretch because it requires City to give up too many points. But Liverpool having that greater strength and depth, and Diaz, if it comes right down to the wire, or goes to that game at the Etihad and there's only 4 to 6 points in it, then that might have an effect. But I just think, in terms of the top four, say, okay, 3 of those positions are probably boxed off: Manchester City, Liverpool and Chelsea. But then we've got 4 clubs looking to get into one, who are Manchester United, West Ham, Arsenal and Spurs. And I mean, Spurs actually ended up being busy, if not entirely in the manner they would have wanted, because Conte still would have wanted a right wing back, and it feels like they could have done with a little bit more quality. Arsenal, we know, wanted a striker. They put in a bid for Dusan Vlahovic. And now West Ham, we also know, wanted a striker, given some of the bids they were putting around, and how short they've been in that position for so long, having to basically almost overuse Michail Antonio. And it feels, had one of those got the signing they needed, I think they could have done a real job pushing Manchester United out of the top 4. As it is, I just wonder, do Manchester United have too much individual quality, even if they've been playing beneath themselves, even if so many of those players have been off form, it often takes 1 or 2 of them to just be enough. And I mean, so they've still got, in terms of match winners, just kind of counting it there, Ronaldo, Cavani, Rashford, Lingard, who've seen it do it for West Ham and has stayed due to the Mason Greenwood situation. Then you've still got Pogba to come back eventually, Bruno Fernandes. Okay, all of those players have been on differing bouts of form this season, but it should still be enough to push them over the line. And I think that's maybe, it was almost that sense with the other clubs, by not spending a bit, they've maybe lost out on potentially huge rewards, because I think for all of them it would have been getting to the Champions League ahead of schedule. But let's see how it plays out. And then the bottom is it's almost even more interesting, just because I think there is still a real unpredictability there. And that's not just due to transfer. I think it's also due to appointments, where it feels like maybe the perceived lesser clubs or teams with lesser quality, Norwich, Watford and Burnley, they've got managers who they're sure things in Dyche, Roy Hodgson and Dean Smith. We know they're going to be well organised. Whereas with Newcastle and Everton, okay, they've made big signings today. They've got higher quality, but there's still a lot of uncertainties, not least about the managers.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, I'm conscious a lot of people at work are busy across the day and haven't followed this overly closely. We had Pat Nevin on before you there. We touched on the Dele Alli signing and the Van de Beek loan deal to Everton, and Aubameyang, it seems, even though that threatened to be a Peter Adam Wingy situation, is going to pitch up with Barcelona. What other business caught your eye then today? What should we make people aware of?
It's one of those days where I've been kind of in front of a laptop or on phones all day. It's almost this mess information there. I think the Aubameyang was interesting in the sense as well that, I mean, I suppose everyone's wondering what sort of deal Arsenal and Barcelona have struck to actually make it happen, given Barcelona's well-publicised financial issues ultimately saw them lose the greatest player in their history. And they, having tried to get rid of one of the players who was supposed to be one of his successors, or at least Neymar's successors, in Dembele. Because initially it had been put to me that that deal couldn't happen, or that the Aubameyang deal couldn't happen without Dembele moving on. But it seems they've come to an arrangement with Arsenal, which must involve either Arsenal covering some of the wages. But I think the suggestion tonight is actually it's possibly that Barcelona come to some sort of agreement instead with Aubameyang. But again, that kind of puts a different spin on things, or not different spin, because obviously Arteta had made a decision that Aubameyang wasn't be in this squad. But given Arsenal are now quite short up front, they've only got Nketiah and Lacazette, his own contract's running out. I mean, what if Aubameyang does actually perform now at Barcelona? How will that look? Although he was off form for some time before eventually getting drummed out by Arteta. Spurs have been very, very busy in terms of outgoings, as you mentioned. Although they probably didn't get in as many as they would have wanted. And there's been a lot of commentary over how Paratici, who was brought in a year ago as kind of Spurs transfer guru, the only actual signings he's made are two basic cast-offs from his former clubs, which doesn't exactly speak the best of his wheeling and dealing. So I always find with like transfer deadline nights, these sort of kind of undercurrents that are often more interesting, because it's not just about what the club are doing now. It speaks to kind of their strategy and what's going to happen further forward. United refusing to sell Lingard to Newcastle. I think there's all sorts in that. We mentioned, of course, I think James Ducker wrote for the Telegraph that the Mason Greenwood situation did influence that, and also it seems there's been a little bit of tension between Manchester United and Newcastle over this. They didn't want to sell to either West Ham or Tottenham because they see both as challengers for the top four, and who knows, maybe, I mean, Lingard in that sense could be influential if he doesn't go. But actually, what was interesting as well was just in terms of how this window sets up these potential races at the top and bottom, was that Newcastle, very late in the window, after not getting Lingard, went in for Dele Alli, but were told basically it was too late. And it was only a loan option as well, which was slightly surprising. And if Dele Alli, I mean, okay, there's a lot of ifs here, given his recent form, given Lampard's own recent, the perception of his own managerial career. If Lingard does prove any kind of difference in keeping Everton up and potentially sending Newcastle down, that could be a huge moment in itself.
Yeah, I was definitely very curious to see what Spurs would do. So Rodrigo Bentancur and Dejan Kulusevski, you said pretty much cast-offs. So they're options for Conte to reshape his midfield. Neither jump out here as transformative at the same time.
No, I suppose the one thing about that is, I mean, with Conte, and again, the most famous example being that season he had at Chelsea in 2016-17, what can actually prove transformative for him aren't necessarily stars, but players that are willing to work for him and completely follow tactical instructions. And with that, we only have to look at the way Victor Moses and Marcus Alonso were so influential for Chelsea that season. So that's where it can potentially work. Actually, of course, there was, I mean, one big one that people shouldn't overlook in the middle of that, given it was another Juventus exit, was Aaron Ramsey going to Rangers, which is, I mean, really, that feels almost like a signing from another era, just because of the fact, I mean, Rangers, they're not what they were even in 2008 when they got to the Europa League final, let alone the 90s when they signed Paul Gascoigne. And Ramsey was given he was so good in last year's Euros, and the fact that he is coming from Juventus, you would have thought he would still have kind of been in one of the, well, not even one of the top 5 leagues, but would have options in England or Spain. But he's taken quite an interesting decision, to be fair to him.
And I would presume a hefty pay cut.
Yeah. I mean, because there's absolutely no way. I mean, I think the word was he's on €100,000 after tax a week. Because obviously, one of the reasons he went to Juventus in the first place was because he was on a Bosman, and it was such an attractive pay package. Although it ended up becoming emblematic of Juventus' change in strategy. After being such a well-run club for so long, they got into this strange situation of just constantly doing deals on frees, which left them quite a bloated squad that have now caused problems. But yeah, so it does mean Ramsey's on an immense wage packet. and Rangers are only going to be covering a certain proportion of that. I'd be very surprised if it's anything more than 20%.
I'll just mention from an Irish perspective, obviously Newcastle involved in a bit of business today. Jeff Hendrick reportedly in last-minute talks to join QPR on loan as Newcastle try and trim down their squad given the additions this afternoon. Have Newcastle done anything which would lead you to say fairly confidently they'll be just fine?
Oh, not maybe just fine, but I think if all clubs perform to par, all teams perform to par, they should have enough quality to stay up. I mean, to be honest, even bringing in Trippier and Wood alone probably should be enough at the bottom. But then, of course, you get into kind of other variables and intangibles here, like how productive is it to throw so many players together at once? Because that has gone wrong. Look at QPR. That QPR are probably the closest situation to Newcastle. They had a raft of big signings and were a disaster in that 2014-15 season. So they're one example as to why it's not necessarily a sure thing that they'll stay up. But in terms of the pure quality of the squad, they should. It's interesting on the Jeff Hendrick one. I did see one meme earlier. My apologies to whoever did this. I can't remember who to credit, but it was Jeff Hendrick in the Homer Simpson role with Darryl Strawberry, with Guimaraes as Darryl Strawberry.
Yeah.
Do you play my position?
He won't be the last in that position, I would suspect.
Which has been one of the issues at Newcastle, and that I think we said this on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But potentially we have players like playing for someone else's future.
Yeah. I would think so. Burnley, by the way, have tried to deal with the departure of Wood by signing 6'6" Wout Weghorst, which already sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun watching Sean Dyche unleash this across the next couple of weeks. You mentioned at the top Diaz for Liverpool for 37 million sterling, which I think is a good deal in comparison to what was being asked for initially. So Colombian, Porto winger, I haven't seen a huge amount of him. Is this good business, Diaz?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for all sorts of reasons. I mean, obviously, Liverpool have had a long-standing interest in him, but they ultimately acted because I think they would have been more content to go in the summer, but acted because it looked like Spurs could do a deal. But there's a bit more to it than that, and that it's also a classic situation with the modern Liverpool where they're solving a problem before it becomes an issue. Because I mean, it's already been discussed so much how this famous front three that have been the core of this great side of their club, they're all going to hit 30 at the same time. Obviously, Salah has contract issues. Mane has contract issues. But now they've got two ready-made replacements for three of those players. I think the expectation is that Diaz will eventually succeed Mane. But of course, he's good enough to start playing now because he's a similar age profile to when Mane and Salah went to Liverpool themselves. So already they're both giving their squad depth and just kind of setting up almost the next cycle of this team without too much of a disruption. So they're not in a situation where if Mane were to go, they then have to go into the market at that point where everyone knows they're more desperate. So they're very much ahead of the game.
It's a reassuring sign Klopp is starting to think that way as well. I mean, I'm sure the transfer committee and the hierarchy of the club is moving things along in that respect. But Klopp still seems incredibly engaged at Liverpool and is showing no signs of even departure. He seems as in love with the place as ever, I would say. This is just looking in from afar and an instinct more than anything. I don't know what you're hearing. Yeah.
I mean, there had always been these kind of more murmurs that Klopp would go at the end of this contract or only stay till 2024 or 2025. That doesn't seem the case. And of course, the other side of that sort of thing, I mean, we saw it with Alex Ferguson back in 2002. Say 3-4 years of advance of a certain point, managers might think to themselves, well, maybe that's a good time to get out. But then it gets there and they're still as engaged, as you say, as engaged and as immersed and as competitive about it all as ever. And if Klopp is still producing a top Liverpool side, and it feels very much like that will be the case, even allowing for City's immense wealth, Liverpool, just through Klopp being there and the success they've had under him, and through the way FSG have gone out of business, even though I know there is some criticism about some of their dealings, but Liverpool have become a kind of a global super club again. They're globally attractive, which makes them commercially attractive, which makes them quite wealthy. And that's only going to perpetuate, especially the longer Klopp is there. So by that point, and let's not forget as well, by then, it isn't impossible that Pep Guardiola leaves this summer or next summer particularly if he wins the Champions League. So if that happens, then who knows? Then we might actually be seeing the real Klopp dominance, because City, all their money will give them a certain competitive position, but Pep Guardiola himself is a generational manager like Klopp. So there might be a bit more of an opening there, and that could re-engage him again. And sure, to return to the Ferguson example, look at that one. He expected to retire in 2002, ended up leaving 11 years later.
Yeah, I mean, we all have certain ages in mind, and then when we reach them, we realise, my God, I feel a whole lot more younger than I thought I would at that age,
And that's the thing about all these great managers. I mean, for all their differences, one of a fair few traits they have in common is usually just an intense competitiveness. And also, I mean this in a kind of complimentary way, but almost kind of an arrogant or an egotistical pride about their own work. And I think that's actually what happens to, you always hear at this point managers like Mourinho or Benitez or Wenger criticised because of the declines they suffered in their latter years, and how kind of doggedly they would persist with the same principles, even though it had become clear the game had moved past them a bit. But part of that was the same sort of pride we're talking about, which is that element of proving that their ways are still right. But actually, one thing Klopp has done very successfully so far, and he's clearly evolved his own style, where it's much him and Guardiola feels like they've influenced each other, and they've both taken real elements from the other's game. Liverpool are capable of being a much more possession-based side than you would have seen from his Dortmund.
So we had no action over the weekend. This, I call it a winter break. I guess we are still very much in winter. Is this all to do with Qatar this year, or is this a situation on account of COVID and the number of games which were crammed in, or was this coming anyway and this is very much enshrined now going forward? We'll always have this gap going forward in the Premier League.
Well, they had previously had, just before COVID, they had previously brought in a kind of a staggered winter break. So the Premier League, they play half the fixtures in consecutive weeks. So every team got a week off. But there were still, so the product didn't suffer. There were still games. This one, this year's is, it's to keep that, but it was a full break because of Qatar, because of the qualifiers, because so many teams would have been missing players, and of course it was the same across so many European leagues. So I think this one is a one-off. From next year, I'd imagine they'll return to the staggered one. It's amazing. I mean, bar a full international break when the European teams are playing. So we actually have kind of qualifiers like primetime TV time around here, Ireland or England involved. I can't remember a break like this, actually.
No, I know. It's only today when I was sitting down in front of my laptop saying, what are we going to talk about tonight? I thought, my God, there's...
Even today I was thinking, I wouldn't mind actually Monday Night Football tonight. My own five-a-side is cancelled tonight, so...
Yeah, the staggered break works perfectly well. It's a great solution, actually.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And again, allows a bit of a break while, as you say, keeping the show on the road. Not
exposing the hollowness of our lives without something like football to keep us going, which is chilling. Miguel of The Independent, thanks very much for giving us all that. There's no mad breaking news as we near final hour, I would think. It's not looking that way.
The only one that was potentially being put out there was Ousmane Dembele, because from what I heard, Barcelona were offering him all around Europe. But he didn't want to go to Tottenham, he didn't want to go to Arsenal, and from that there were no real options for him. So unless he changes his mind, because he's basically being forced out, I can't really see anything else massive happening. In fact, we're at that stage right now where a lot of press officers are now kind of texting journalists basically saying, that's us done for the night.
Right, okay, very good. Miguel Delaney, that's pretty much us done for the night as well. Thanks so much.
Cheers, Joe.
Cheers. That's Miguel there from The Independent, whose work you can obviously read online at your leisure, independent.co.uk.